Hi, everyone. My name is Imran Ahmed. I'm CEO and founder of the Center for Countering Digital Hate. I'm really excited today because we've got with us a guest, Matthew O'Neill, who's one of the producers of a new documentary, Can't Look Away, directed by Matthew and by Perry Peltz. And it looks at how social media platforms are causing serious harm to young people, focusing on real families who've lost children to suicide, overdose, or sextortion through apps like Instagram and Snapchat. I'm really excited to have this conversation. I watched the movie a couple of nights ago, and I mean, it's incredibly powerful and has some of my friends, like people like Matt Berkman, in the movie as well. So, Matthew, thank you for being here and for making this incredibly powerful film.
Thank you for having me, and glad to be here and glad to talk about this film always. We think that the messages and the families and the lawyers featured in the film are people that the world needs to know about.
So just to start us off, can you give people a quick intro to the film and what it covers for those who haven't seen it yet?
Sure. The name of the film is Can't Look Away, The Case Against Social Media. And we chose the title Can't Look Away because over the course of this investigation into how social media is interacting with young people, which started at Bloomberg News with the reporting of Olivia Carvel, and then grew into this Bloomberg News documentary that is Can't Look Away, The Case Against Social Media, is because the way algorithms work is often, we think, we who of an older generation, that young people are searching for things online. And the truth is they're being fed things online.
Yeah.
To a large degree, what they're being fed is not what they're searching for, not necessarily what they want, but what the algorithm determines they can't look away from, to keep them as engaged, as consistently for as long a period of time as possible.
I mean, that point is incredibly important. It's something I talk about a lot, is that social media doesn't give you what you want. It gives you what it wants you to want. And, we did a study, Deadly by Design, a couple of years ago, looking at TikTok and the first half hour of the For You feed. And within 2.5 minutes, TikTok is showing a 13-year-old girl who's opened a new account, self-harm content. Within 8 minutes, eating sort of content. They never asked for it. That's what the platform wants them to want, what it thinks will keep them addicted. And once we dispel that idea that social media is just a reflection of our id rather than the commercial imperatives of a company, that means we can have shame-free conversations with our kids about what it is that they're seeing and how to actually contextualize it, because we're not making it oh, you're being shown that because you're bad in some way. So it's really, I'm so grateful that you're making that point so emphatically and so, with real testimony and real evidence as well. But tell me, just more personally, what made you want to be part of telling this particular story?
Well, Perry and I were in conversations with Bloomberg News, and specifically the executive producer of the film, Kristen Powers, over a period of months, talking about different projects that we might focus on. And when we read some of Olivia's reporting, one of the pieces that she wrote talked a little bit about the Social Media Victims Law Center. And in talking with Olivia and Kristen, this group of lawyers at the Social Media Victims Law Center felt that they had potential to carry a story. And really, by using what they were doing to help amplify the stories of families that they're touching and representing, it brought the documentary a narrative that allowed it not to be another survey show about social media. It's not didactic at all. You go on this journey with the lawyers, with the families, as they fight for justice, as they fight for change from not only the social media companies, but also from, in our case, the U.S. government in regulation around social media companies. So it all began with Olivia's reporting about the SMVLC, the Social Media Victims Law Center. You mentioned Matt Bergman, Laura Marquez Garrett, these incredible lawyers who have taken on this fight to represent families who, in far too many cases, have lost children connected to social media harm. And that's really the crux of the film. It goes into the details. There's a legal drama aspect of it as the case is made in one of these cases that winds up being a groundbreaking case. I don't want to give it away because we're also hoping to a certain degree, like you can't look away from the film. But Imran, you used a phrase that I think reflects something that Perry and I try to emphasize all the time in talking about what we learned in the film, which is shame-free conversations.
Yeah.
And each of the parents who so generously share over and over again some of the worst times in their lives with audiences, with lawmakers, talking about the loss of their children and how it happened, wish that they'd had the opportunity to have a shame-free conversation about social media with their children. And they advocate that parents have shame-free conversations with their children about their use of social media and what can happen on social media. It's really hard to do because most parents, I get fed hair replacement treatments and beard trimmers, or how to buy a new lawnmower. But what our children are fed is so different than anything that we see. And we hope that Can't Look Away the film can be a conversation starter, so you can have those shame-free conversations with your children.
Yeah, I'm being fed the same adverts, but I'm using them, so I still have some.
That's right. That's why you're clean shaven and have.
Look, this film focuses on some pretty heavy stuff, Matt. I mean, and I meet these parents as well, and the shame-free conversation bit comes from our parents guide, which is on our website. Well, it's on our microsite protectingkidsonline.org, and I wrote that parents guide with Ian Russell, who's the father of a 14-year-old girl who took her own life because of content that she found on Meta and Pinterest. And that was what the coroner in her case ruled in the UK. And Ian Russell, the father, working with him is wonderful because he's a great human being. But the pain that he's experienced, it bleeds into your soul. And it motivates you, but it also takes something of you. And you're focusing on families who've lost children to suicide, overdose, sextortion, all driven by social media. What's it like to work with people so closely going through that kind of grief, and how does that shape the story you tell?
To start with the second part of your question, which is how does it shape the story that we tell? Perry and I, Perry Peltz, the other director and producer of the film, in the edit room and in the field, had intense conversations about exactly what elements to share and what elements to keep in the film. Because these parents are sharing their trauma with us. They're sharing it with the audience. Also, there are elements of what is seen by children on social media that is far more traumatic than anything that we would ever want to publish in a film. And so the question of what content that encourages suicide to share on inside the film and give context to in these individual stories was an intense one, because I certainly, when I read the first time that children were being fed content that encouraged suicidation on TikTok, I thought sad songs or depressive content. I didn't realize that there are actually videos that are being fed to children that explicitly encourage them to harm themselves, to kill themselves, with explicit instructions, and it's beyond what you can possibly imagine. So we discussed at great length what to show and how to show elements of these things so that audiences could understand that this is really happening. While on the other hand, making sure that it's still a film that can be consumed with young people and is appropriate to be a conversation starter and watch, frankly. And we think we parked it in just about the right spot. You can weigh in on that, but here, it's been rated for ages 13 and up. We would always encourage parents to watch for themselves and decide if it's something they want to watch with their children or encourage their children to watch. But we believe that it can be again, a good conversation starter for that shame-free conversation.
Yeah, no, I absolutely believe that. My wife and I, we're parents too, and our children are young, very, very young, and it is those conversations that you need to have with your kids. And I think this is a really powerful thing to watch that gets people in the right headspace and are coming at it from a similar set of perspectives to have those conversations. But one of the things that's really powerful about the movie is it's not just about individual responsibility as parents. You're also talking to the Social Media Victims Law Center. And, CCDH, we're familiar with their work. I love Matt. He's one of my favorite people to have breakfast with. What made you decide to focus so much on the legal angle? And how do you see Section 230 in particular of the Communications Decency Act 1996? For those people that don't know what I'm talking about, that is a law passed in 1996 that gave special protection to social media companies. That means that they cannot really easily be sued, even when they cause a kid to take their own life. So how did you see Section 230 showing up in these cases?
So Section 230 of, as you mentioned, the Communication Decency Act of 1996 in the United States does, in many people's interpretation, protect these social media companies, while the intent of it was to protect internet service providers from content published on their platforms. It's been widely interpreted to protect social media companies as well from civil liability. Matt and Laura and the other lawyers of the Social Media Victims Law Center have a novel take on on accountability that we follow in the lawsuit against Snapchat, which is to hold these companies to a product liability standard. That what is happening is that Snapchat or TikTok or Instagram is not a service provider. It's not Con Ed. It's not AT&T or I don't know what the equivalent in the UK is of the telephone company. It is a product that is being marketed and consumed and used by many, many people, but the real focus here is by children. And that just the same way that seatbelts are required in cars, needs to be in their argument, requirements on these product manufacturers, even if the product is a software tool, that are basically protective of people, but very specifically protective of children who can't make informed decisions for themselves, whose prefrontal cortex is not fully formed, and products that are being designed to sort of take advantage of or, wheedle its way into exactly those weaknesses in the prefrontal cortex and in the way children's minds work to essentially entrap them on social media.
It's really interesting because if I was to move back to my home country of Great Britain, my children would be experiencing an internet that is actually regulated by the Online Safety Act. If we moved to France or Germany, it would be our kids would be using a social media that was regulated by the Digital Services Act in Brussels. Right. It's our kids here in America who are the least protected in the world and have the least rights as well for recourse if something terrible happens to them. And I think that's incredibly disturbing to me because, one of the things I realized really early on I've been doing this for 9 years now, 6 years publicly, but 9 years was when the incident that kicked me off on this work, the murder of my colleague, Jo Cox, who was a 41-year-old mother of two and the member of parliament for Batley in Spen, was murdered by a terrorist who'd been radicalized online. This work started, we've realized that the platforms themselves do not care. The reality is that they know what could be done to fix their platforms, but they won't do it. And so you've got to have some mechanism to force them to abide by the law, to abide by what is decent. And in some countries, that's regulation. In some countries, that's litigation. And 230 has prevented that normalizing force, that socializing force that that every other industry has to experience to make sure they aren't just profiting at the expense of people. And that idea that social media companies won't do it on their own because they are commercial entities, they don't have a morality, or they're not told to care about us, they're told to make money. And what was interesting to me is that you had another one of my friends in your documentary, Arturo Bejar, who's a former Facebook engineer, who warned internally at Instagram about the harm it was causing teens. And he wasn't listened to. And, thankfully, he's come out there as a whistleblower, is telling the world what he knows, and what he knows the platform knows. Now, did you try and speak to the platforms themselves yourself?
Yes, we did. We offered them the opportunity to provide interviews, which they declined. We offered them the opportunity to provide statements to see if they would be relevant to the film. Listen, we would have loved to have included richly, in the same way that there's personal access to the lawyers and plaintiffs in all of these cases, to see what the lawyers and the people at Meta and TikTok and Snapchat were thinking and saying and doing. Transparency is essential in understanding our world and understanding the motivations. They all declined to participate in the way in which the lawyers from the Social Media Victims Law Center and the plaintiffs they represent, these families that were sort of seeking accountability from the social media companies, chose to participate in this film. We can speculate as to why, but I think essentially the most important thing is that generally, if I'm proud of what I'm doing, I am totally transparent about it. And that seems to be the way in which these families and the lawyers from the Social Media Victims Law Center comport themselves as they walk through the world. I wish for our entire society to be more informed, we would have had that same access and intimacy and understanding from the social media companies themselves.
Yeah. Can I tell you, there's one thing about your film that really I thought was genuinely innovative and so clever, was the way that you made the case that this is a public health crisis. It's not a tech story. It shouldn't be, this shouldn't be a story that's covered by tech journalists. It should be covered by public health. It's a public health crisis in America today. Now, if every parent, policymaker, or platform executive watch this film, what do you hope or want them to take away from it?
Well, I think that public health framing is a very deliberate one. And my partner in this, who I mentioned before, Perry Peltz, the other producer and director, is a longtime public health advocate, has a doctorate in public health, and has looked at how films and storytelling can shape society and have a real impact on public health. And that's what we believe that journalism can do and films and storytelling can do. Because when you see these stories, it changes outcomes. It certainly, from our experience, from the feedback we're getting from parents and audiences, is changing the way they interact with their children, how they think about social media, how schools are thinking about social media, and seeing the societal harm raises it to the level of a public health crisis. The former Surgeon General of the United States, Vivek Murthy, also has called it a public health crisis. It is really one of the crises of our time that young people are facing. And it's very different than previous public health crises. Although the tactics of some of the social media companies reflect the same tactics that the Sacklers used with the opioid crisis, or the tobacco companies used around tobacco addiction, and the documents that you mentioned, Arturo Bejar, but that Arturo and others have brought to the fore, prove that there were these internal conversations about making sure the products are addictive. This is a different public health crisis, because when I was 18 years old, 36% of US teens smoked. Essentially 100% of US teens use social media. And
Yeah.
I don't have the number at my fingertips, but it's like 2/3 of them use it more than 3 hours a day. And it's just astounding the level of this public health crisis. It sort of pushes these previous crises into the background because it is ubiquitous for young people.
I mean, to me, it's an unlicensed social experiment that we're running on children all across America, and no one's voted for it. No one agreed to it. No one knew it was happening. And we are now deep into that experiment.
Imran, I think the counter argument is that, oh, you clicked the box and said yes, or oh, the kids entered their date wrong. My 10-year-old knows how to get around an age verification software in the United States because he understands that to be 13, all he has to do is do the math. I think that some of these things, and what drives me personally crazy, is this disconnect when advertising on some of these platforms is clearly targeted to young people under the age of what is the age that they can use the platform. Yet they saying they can't identify when a 7-year-old or a 9-year-old is using TikTok or Instagram, but advertising that is clearly geared towards a 7-year-old or a 9-year-old appears on this service. These are some of the most innovative and smartest people who have gone into Silicon Valley and into the creative space of the internet and social media. And there's great things that happen on social media too. I will hope that these people, you asked what we hope in terms of business executives or leaders in the industry feel when they watch this film. I hope they feel a sense of, if not culpability, responsibility for making change and using their prodigious talents and intellect and wealth to protect our children.
Well, look, thank you for using your prodigious talent and intellect. I don't know about wealth, but definitely talent and intellect to make this film. I want everyone, I think everyone needs to watch it. So where can folks who are watching this interview go to watch your film?
Please go to Jolt, JOLT.film. The film is called Can't Look Away, The Case Against Social Media. You can sign up to watch it there. You can also try to sign up to have a screening in your community at jolt.film. And also, if you look and Google up Can't Look Away in Bloomberg News, there are all sorts of resources, like the resources that the Center for Countering Digital Hate also provide, that you can use to guide a conversation with your children or with other young people you care about or with your fellow parents.
Yeah, download all the resources. Trust me, as a parent, there's never enough good advice out there. So thank you for your time, Matt. It was really a pleasure and an honor to spend some time with you. And thank you for making the movie. And I just want everyone out there to go and watch it now.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thanks for your care in this space, and thank you for what you do. And please do watch Can't Look Away, everyone.